and the servers can actually see where your wait time is, where your queue time. There's a ton of information on the backside. This we were pretty sure because all these transactions were doing the exact same thing against the same server. I was pretty confident that this was related to the communication quality into the location because everything else was the same. And that's one of the good points you do with testing is you do controls. You leave everything the same and you mess around with one variable. You guys are all quality people. Y'all already know that.
So you're the reason we get another 6% rate.
No.
So we'll pay for the new lines into this place.
But that lets that person work so much faster, so I don't have to have 3 people on staff. I can have 2 people
Oh,
on
great.
staff.
Now only 2 people lost their.
Oh, you just can't be pleased. And reality is, I have no control over that piece of the process. I just collect data.
Now,
Yes, sir.
Lost your jobs and your pension.
I'm looking for data that I'm not seeing.
What? I'm sorry?
I'm looking for data that I'm not
Well,
seeing.
this will just.
I know this is summarized for your presentation, but in the real world of the boardroom, would you be showing more factors? For example, the location, let's call it Aztec, using at the same time using different ISPs.
Well, if that, I mean, we did, for this one, we did not vary those things, but obviously as part of an investigation, we might try. If we were gonna have a shootout between 3 carriers into a location.
Yeah.
Most rural locations in New Mexico, we've got 1 provider. There's not a real shopping mart.
Oh,
But,
okay.
You know, think
So
of,
it's not a choice between CableNet or Verizon or Quest or.
well, yeah, I mean, you go down to,
Radio Shack?
no, Radio Shack, where the aliens landed.
Roswell.
Roswell. How many internet providers do you have in Roswell?
2.
Maybe 2 if you're lucky. You have 2. Rio Rancho,
really?
I've got 1. I've got Cable One. I can do DSL, but in the commercial locations, in some of these remote locations, you may not have a whole lot of options. But that's sort of one of the things we do in the more in-depth analysis we give to our to management. We break out this data by location, by distance. We factor out distance, try and find 2 locations that are equally 200 miles apart from home. So we sit there and say, here's what's causing this delta, and you give them that information. For a summary like this, you don't get that information. I'm not going to tell you which location's where. You can pretty well
I thought there was
guess.
a lot more competition in New Mexico than you're talking about.
Are you talking about data competition or
I'm talking about internet providers type things.
internet?
Yeah, there's just, you look at some of those rural areas, there's just nothing out there. We just have such a low population density. It's not like Los Angeles where there's 6 cable companies competing for your dollar.
Oh.
Case study number 2. Another local electric customer had an issue where the people that worked in customer service, hi, how would you like to pay your bill today, reported that the system slowed down in the afternoon. This is another one, if you've ever worked in customer service, you get this kind of question a lot. The system got sleepy, it got tired, it runs slower, it doesn't like me. Those things don't really, if it slows down, it's not because it doesn't like you. It slows down because some other factors at play. So the question we asked is, how does performance of this application change during the business day? So my solution, create a script that looks up a customer record. Once again, I'm in production, so I'm not changing data because it's real customer data. Just looks it up by one of 3 methods, examines the record, does a number of little steps to get enough things to simulate what real customer service reps are doing, and then moves on. And it did this for 10 hours a day, multiple days during the week. So we can sit there and say, was it because of Bad Tuesday, something else went on in the marketplace? We collected a whole bunch of data to analyze and merge it all together. And Quality Center is very good for that. It will merge all this data together and let you look for trends. What did we see? Here we are marching across the day. I don't see times going up and down by the time of day. I don't see any kind of trend that says it gets worse in the afternoon. I do see it gets a little more uneven in the evening, right before we start doing some of our nightly backups, where probably batch processes are kicking in and putting a big CPU hit on the system. But I don't see a big spike in the afternoon. What I did notice when I looked at the data is that depending on how you come into the system, and most people when you call in, do you know your account number? like 12 digits. Do you know your address? 2413 Avenida Del Reyes Southwest. Do you know your phone number? Hey, it's a 10-digit number. I'm pretty sure I've got that memorized. What we found is that people who search do their information by phone. What's your account? How can I find you, please? Give me your phone number. It took 10 seconds to do a transaction versus 1.8 by address or 4.7 by account number. So if you give them your phone number, it's going to take twice as long.
Right.
Why?
It sounds, you just said, I think, that if a person gives the CSR the phone number, that's the easiest and best thing they can give the CSR.
It's the one that they usually have at hand. But what we found out, who would have expected that it would take twice as long if you do your search by account number? What we found, exactly, it shouldn't.
It's an internal computer server problem?
It turned out that what it was, we had an index missing on the phone number. So we added another index to the database. But until we did this analysis, how would we have found this if we didn't do a performance test? We wouldn't. Because on a spot check, when we did our test here, well, they all look about the same, they're not that far apart. But you run enough data, you collect stuff, you can start to make trends. You start to spot things by looking at the data in a different way. I didn't go in looking to see, is it slower by phone? This just came up because I was really trying to answer the question, does it get slower during the day? In the afternoon, it's like, no, not really. Kind of actually gets a little bit faster during the day. But boy, it sure sucks if you call in by your phone number. So what we did is we added another index to improve response time.
Now,
Yes, sir.
so as I understand this, you didn't initially think that there might have been this difference between the phone and the account number and all that.
Right.
You did your hourly check, didn't see much of a difference. Did you or whoever was running this say, well, there's going to be certain variables that we should at least consider even if we don't know whether they're important or not, and just see which one shows a significant difference, and that's how...
Yeah, I mean, we slotted it out by all kinds of things. As we looked at the data, we also discovered a few other things. That the response time, we see this wildly variable response time. Why should it take so much longer from one customer to another? Aren't all the customers the same? The
No.
reality is they aren't. Customers that pay their bills on time, never had a delinquency, never had gone to collection, didn't have a whole bunch of issues, system could respond very quickly because there's no data to load to the screen. Customers that had 4 or 5 meters hooked up to their system because they were maybe an apartment complex, customers that had credit issues perhaps, customers that had other notes out there in the wild would take longer to load because there's just more data to bring into the system. What we did with this is we actually ended up with a pool of about 3,000 customers. And we ran those same customers over and over and over again to try and filter out and control for that. We ran the same customer one day by account number, the next day by phone number, the next day by address, to see what do we see. Do we see any patterns where I could control for that and throw that data out? The other thing we found in our research is kind of anecdotal. We don't really have, I couldn't point to it. But as we looked at the customers who were typically calling in the morning, who calls in the morning?
Housewives.
People that are usually a little more organized, perhaps have, my dog ate my bill, I need you to send me a new one. Customers that tend to have less complex questions. People who call, at the end of the day, they've come home, there might be a delinquent notice on their door, power cutoff notice. They're typically calling at the end of the day a little more stressed, and they might have a little more complex data that takes longer to load. Now, I can't control for that, and my data all used good customers because we couldn't really pull bad customers, but we noticed that this was a trend. Do I fix it? No, but I acknowledge that it's part of my research. Next, customer number 3. This is not a local electric utility company in Mexico. This was the largest EDI service provider in the United States. Company I used to work for. We had 10 locations in the US, 15 locations internationally, and we had a large development team in India, 800 engineers, software engineers based in India. One of the projects I was on was to deploy a new global defect tracking system to replace 5 different defect tracking systems with one. The issue we had is the people in India were calling, complaining, saying the system takes too long to load, takes too long to load, takes too long to load. we can't stand it, we can't use it, we won't go live with it. We tested it in US locations. Hey, how's it going in Michigan? How's it going in California? The system seems to respond pretty well. I don't know what they're talking about, those guys in India. Who knows what those people are. They're always asleep when I want to call them because they're 12 hours difference. Duh. So we created a script that executed a standard process 10 times an hour and ran it from a load generator in India. Physically shipped in a load generator to India so I could run these tests. What did we find? Oh, here's my script. I created a script because this was a software development house. We had projects that were lots of defects. My sample database, 200,000 defects in it. Those weren't open defects. Those were defects that had been fixed, that were part of patches, that were part of releases. So when you get, build 3.1.2.12, that's where all these defects are tied to. Ran my load generator in India, ran the test for 24 hours. I ran it on business days and non-business days in India's calendar because obviously maybe it's something to do with the network. Maybe it's a problem somewhere else. Is it tied to my operation or is it tied to the phone wire that's stretching from Ohio clear to India? Found out those guys actually had a valid point. This is the response time to do 24 steps from most US locations. It was about 26 seconds. Didn't vary a whole lot during the business day. Just didn't change. Here's the response time from India, running over a 12-hour day. Ran for 12 hours, so I typically would start at 6 a.m. their time, ramp it up, run it all the way till 6 p.m. at the end of the day. 6 a.m. when nobody's there, building's dark. It would take about 100 seconds to run through the 24 steps that took about 22 seconds time in the US. So already we see it kind of stinks to be in India. But then as people started ramping in, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, we saw volume go up. At the peak of their business day, when everybody's in there trying to work, what would take me 22 seconds to do in the US would take them more than 700 seconds. That's like 12 minutes. It would take me less than half a minute, 12 minutes for them. Boy, you know what? You guys got a legitimate beef. You can't work. If I'm expecting your work throughput to be as much as it is for the US engineers, and my system doesn't support it, you've got a very legitimate case as to why is this a problem? We found out as we did some research on it that the issue was business process changes were needed. We didn't change any code. We didn't spend any money on hardware. This was a no-cost fix. We just kind of looked at reducing the traffic on the system. We found out the issue was tied to latency because people were doing a whole lot of things on their business computers that weren't necessarily business related. So our latency in India, good latency to India was considered 300 milliseconds. 300 milliseconds is terrible. You'd fire your internet company here if they give you 300 milliseconds. India to the US, that's considered pretty good. The purple line is before the changes. At the peak, it would get up to 400 or up to, we actually had up to 1,000 milliseconds waiting for response time. And what the tool did, once all those kinds of delays, it would break the packet of data from being this size to being 2 this size. If it took too long, make 2 this size, 2 that size. And eventually the system would end up thrashing because it would broken packets up into so many small pieces trying to get through this latency, the system would kind of freeze up. So by changing business processes, once again, no code, we took this big latency spike out and brought latency back into within acceptable ranges. And we were able to bring it in and make the process work. But once again, I was examining the issue and sitting there saying, yeah, you're complaining, maybe you've got a point. Let's examine the issue and ask the question, is there really a performance problem? Best practices, we're on the home stretch, guys. Crashing production, always bad. From a QA test point, it's nothing worse just to crash production. It's just, there's no good way to get out of it. So always test your scripts in a QA, or if you can't test it in QA because you typically don't have a QA network available, you've got QA servers sitting on the production network, test it in off hours. Pretty easy to get up, stay up till 11 o'clock, get up at 1, get up at 6 a.m. on Saturday, find the time window to run your tests, run those tests during those off hours to prove out your script. Because scripts, just like any other piece of code, can be problematic.